We ended our last conversation with you saying that it is only the ones who have everything that can actually play. Because the one who is full before he arrives is the one that asks for nothing from the game. And when a human being has no need, he is free. And when he is free, he becomes untouchable, which leads to this whole idea of being legendary that you continue to talk about. Unpack that for me a little bit.
I think everyone looks at uh, their craft and their sport and their business and whatever their pursuit is as a place from which to get something. Um, it's sort of a wishing well of sorts. And that creates a lot of problems because the field, the field of play doesn't really have any power to give anybody anything. So everyone, tends to have, in general, a hole that they're trying to fill, and that hole is filled by success or by wins or by money or by status, um, whatever it may be. And that really creates an enormous problem because then you're beholden to the outcome uh, to decide how it is that you feel about yourself. So that means that how you feel about yourself and what your state of so-called happiness or joy or peace, whatever it is always in the hands of someone else or something else. And that's really slavery.
So, one of the things we've talked about in the past is your ability to let go of the outcome, right? To have the mindset that to approach any endeavor with having the outcome being a byproduct of the pursuit. It's tough as hell to get to that, especially when you got a lot riding on the line, whether you're in sports or in business. Where do you start to get to that level?
Well, it's tough to get to that if you are viewing it as a prescription. It's not so tough to get to that if you come to the conclusion that you have no other choice. Everything is tough when it's viewed from the standpoint of a prescription. It's not only tough, it's virtually impossible because you're doing it because of a should. And, if, you might be able to give away some secondhand clothing by way of a should, but you're not going to give away the family jewels by way of a should. So for you to give away the family jewels, you must see no other option. You're not going to do it because it's good for you or because the rule book says that you should.
Let's not assume it's a prescription, right? Let's
Well,
assume.
but it has to be. It has to be though. If it's that difficult, then it is being pursued from the lens of this is what I should do, and this is what I'm supposed to do, and this is what I've been told is a good idea because it may benefit me down the road, and this is a good habit to get into. And those are very cosmetic things. Those don't have the power to allow someone to give away the family jewels. For someone to let go, this is all like sports psychology, really this hot air, be in the present and, give, um, forget about the outcome, let go. And what no one seems to understand is that the only reason that you're being told that is because it's an ulterior motive to help you play better. So it's all a trick, and the mind recognizes that trick. So it's just an ulterior motive. It's just an avenue to get somewhere. It's a means to an end, and because it's a means to an end, it has no power. It isn't done genuinely. It isn't done because the person arrived there and discovered that if I don't do it, there is incredible ruin. And that ruin is not something that I've been told about that theoretically may occur in the future. I've experienced that ruin. I've experienced how my life is completely in shambles when the outcome of a tournament dictates how I look and feel about my life and my profession. So everything has to be genuine. You can't come at it through prescriptive means. So I think that's why it's difficult. It isn't just difficult. It's, like I said, it's virtually impossible.
So none of us are immune to the feeling of elation when we've succeeded. At the same time, none of us are immune to the fear of failure. Right? We're not in your headspace yet. You know, if a business fails, I mean, unless you're Yoda, you probably feel really bad about it. Do you want that feeling? Are you referring to that feeling when that feeling gets so bad? Is that where I have to go in order to be able to get to that level of mind share where I don't give a damn about the outcome anymore? And with that, I am on a path that to that legendary status that you're talking about?
You know, no one ever looks at where they are because they're so busy looking at where they should be. So no one ever looks to see what are the consequences of the way that I view things. What are the consequences that not that I will experience, but that I've already experienced. I mean, everyone's looking at the results of whether the outcome of the game or the business turned out. Well, what about the results of the way in which you've been looking at the game? What about those results? What about the consequences, not of the game, but what about the consequences of the way that you've been looking at it? So you talk about, well, if the business fails and the person feels sad. Well, that isn't the first time that they've felt dejected. They've been feeling dejected the entire time. It wasn't just when it failed. When it failed, they felt the dejection of failure. But all along, they've been feeling the dejection of fear. So why is it that no one's looking at that? Why is no one looking at the fact that, why is everyone looking at the dramatic climax? Why are they not looking and saying, but, for the last 20 years, I've lived in fear and anxiety. So that's already happened. That isn't something that's going to happen. That's where the person has been living. So why not look at that outcome and say, well, why is it that I've been living in fear and anxiety for all these years? And then ask that question. And then that will take a person to the place where he sees, well, I've been living in fear and anxiety because the way in which I've been looking at the game is completely detrimental to how I feel. It's not sustainable. That is the road of truth. Not the hysteria over how can a person lose his company and still not be dejected. Forget that question. Look at where the person already is. Now, your question would be valid if you said, for the last 20 years, I've been building a company, and I've been joyful and peaceful the entire time. And then when the company failed, then I became dejected, and that was the first time, only when it failed. I would say fine. Like, that's a valid question, but that isn't happening. Everyone's distraught from beginning to end. So why not examine the level of distraughtness that the person's been swimming in for years? No one's looking at that.
I totally agree with you. Right. And I want to come back to that in a moment, but you triggered something in me because one of the great insights that I have learned from you and that you provided me is this idea of access. And you brought it up in one of your last podcasts where you talked about, hey, these people who you consider elite, they don't have a problem with acquiring new knowledge or new skills. What gets in the way is accessing those skills. So
Yeah.
is that what you're talking about here, with the ability to be able to access that by asking myself that question?
No, I mean that's different. I mean, you don't have to access it. Maybe when you ask yourself the question, it's just the nature of the question. I mean, instead of asking the question, why, how can I not feel dejected when the company fails, rather than asking that question, ask the question, why do I feel dejected already, all along? That's the question. So as for skill acquisition versus skill access, that's a question of performance. So when someone is not performing well, the performance community and the coaches and the sports psychologists and the business coaches and the motivational speakers and whoever it is, they're all singing the same tune. They're all talking from the standpoint of, well, you have to go back and work on your technique, and you have to work harder, and you have to improve your skill. And well, if that, okay, let's once again look at the evidence. If that was the case, then they would never play well, right? If it was a question of skill acquisition, then they wouldn't have one great game and then three bad games. Where would the great game come from if the skill wasn't there? If it hadn't been acquired, it shouldn't have any great game. But that isn't the case. They'll have great games, and then they'll have a bunch of lousy games. So that means, according to that logic, when the person had the great games, the skill was there. And then when they had lousy games, the skill disappeared, and now they have to go back and learn the technique all over again?
Or relearn something.
Wow, you relearn? I mean, do you relearn tying your shoes? If you've been doing something for 25 years, you have to relearn it? When just last week you performed fantastic? So between last Wednesday and today, you lost the skill? Like you were walking down the street and it just drifted out?
Well, don't you believe, do you believe in complacency, that at some point success becomes more of a curse?
That's a different question. I'm talking about, where did that skill go between last Wednesday and today?
I'm sure it's still there. Right? It's
That's
a matter.
right.
It's a matter of me recalling it or accessing it, like you're talking about.
Right. That's my point. So the skill is still there. It hasn't gone anywhere. So if the skill is still there, why is everyone working on acquiring the skill again or acquiring more skill? Why is that the question that is being asked? That doesn't make any sense to me.
So what's the question that you're asking?
Why is it that I'm not able to access it?
And what often gets in the way? I know it's
Everything
personal.
But everything but technique. So let's if the bleeding's in the head, we'll get to what part of the head the bleeding's in, but can we first move away from the leg?
Sure.
Right. So if everyone's already going back to the coach or to the business guru or whatever it is, what do I have to do and what's my 5-step plan?
The business guru, right? Because the business guru has all the answers.
Well, the business guru has all the prescriptions.
And we all fall for it.
So
it sells books.
Yeah. Well, not only fall, people ask for it. So no one really gets anywhere. This is all just a scam. I mean, everything in this society is a scam. From the government to the FDA to sports coaching to business coaching, it's all a farce. There's nothing real here. It's just swirling muddy water, because and it has nothing to do with intelligence. It has nothing to do with people not being smart enough. There's nothing whatsoever to do with that. No one's interested in asking the effective questions, the real questions, the questions that actually get someone somewhere. Because everyone's interested in working on stuff all the time. Everyone's interested in practice. And everyone's interested in, following sort of the guidelines of what to do and what you should do. And everyone's got a, technical instructor and everything. it's sheep following sheep.
So help me drill down a little bit then. Help me drill a little bit deeper from that purity aspect that you talk about. Just in general, what is it that we can start to do to try to get closer to getting away from these prescriptions and focusing on the real truth that will enable us to be more successful, to achieve greater heights, to be happier, whatever it is that you will ultimately define as legendary?
I don't think it has anything to do with what you need to do, because that will be another prescription. I think it has everything to do with the idea that to ask yourself if you're really serious, and to give yourself an honest answer. And it's a very honest answer to say that I'm not serious. The truth is, very, very few people are serious.
Well, we started off with three,
people,
and then we, like last time, we said five. So there's five people on the planet now, and I hope I'm one of them. So.
Right. Okay, so for those 5 people, if they're really serious, then I'll say, okay, just please don't believe anything that I say, because I don't believe anybody. So don't ask anyone to believe me.
But Kapil, we do believe you. But that's the truth.
But just look at your own life. Look at your own life. I'll say to the 5 people, wherever they are in the world, if they're listening, look at your own life and examine honestly and innocently all the prescriptions that you followed in, for purposes of your life and well-being and your business and your profession, whatever it may be, and see where it's gotten you. See if it has gotten you to an arrival. See if it has gotten you to a permanent state in which there are no more questions. See if it has gotten you to a holy grail. See if it has gotten you to a place where you don't need any more how-to. Examine for yourself. That's my honest answer. Examine for yourself.
I'm going to answer
because
for the
if you
5
don't
people.
do that, if you don't do that, then you won't move genuinely away from prescription.
Let me answer for the 5 people, starting with myself. No, of course it hasn't gotten me to where the holy grail or a level or a state of permanence. No, of course, that's why I am intrigued and incredibly appreciative of the perspective that you bring to the table.
And so if that's the case, and it hasn't gotten you where you would like it to get you, then you will naturally, fundamentally, and organically move away from prescriptions, not because I say so, but because you have found for yourself that it hasn't gotten you anywhere. And as you move away from prescriptions, what will begin to happen is that your questions will begin to change. They will fundamentally change. Because now you're not looking through the lens of a how-to anymore. Because you have realized, not that you shouldn't, but because you have realized that looking through that lens of how-to doesn't work. And so when someone's questions begin to change, then the people or the situations that may provide the direction for that person also begin to change. It's like a Rubik's Cube. You change one face, and all the faces change.
What is the context of the questions that you started to ask yourself when you started to sense that shift?
My questions are much more along the lines of what is the source of the matter? What is the one thing that fixes 12, as opposed to fixing 12 things, right? What is the most fundamental truth upon which all these problems exist? If that fundamental truth was realized, then everything that was resting upon it would fall away.
Well,
It's never in the realm of the how-to.
Yeah, well, I think we all get that now. Right? We definitely all get that. But when you look at these elite people, or when you look at these high achievers, the world looks and starts to say that, hey, what distinguishes these individuals from others is that it starts with talent. However, I'm continuing to be convinced that really it isn't talent. It's upstairs, like you say, it's their mind or their mindset. One, is that true? Do you see that as the fundamental thing that distinguishes these super elites that you're talking about from the rest of the world? Does it start with their mind?
No, it starts with talent.
So it is. So you do agree then with that?
But what distinguishes? Well, my agreement only goes so far. So,
of course.
The departure is coming very, very soon. If you look at within a population of elites, like within a professional, basketball arena, or within, the world of professional sports. So there, everyone's very, very talented. Okay? And so there, what separates one from the super elite from the other elite, that's mind. But what separates the whole, because your question was, what is it that separates the elite from the rest of the people? Let's count.
Yep.
But within that domain, it's the mind.
Got it. So take me to that space then. What is the mind like for those that are in that, ultimately in that legendary state that you're going to talk about? Is it no mind?
Yeah. Well, I would say it's DNA, first and foremost. I think some people are just, their sensibilities are different. The things that attract them are different. The things that they gravitate towards are different. The places that they want to go in terms of their vision for their career is different. The way that they'll do even things outside of their profession will be different. Now, I think it's a mistake to start looking at these people and following their habits. No, I think that's just, I'm so against all that stuff. The 7 habits of effective people. It's just drivel.
Well,
okay?
it's always the number 7 for whatever reason. It's always 7 something.
Yeah, there's always, So and no one should try to be that, right? Because I think there's talent within everybody. But why is there one who's super elite? Because his DNA is different.
But if I don't have that DNA, do I not have a chance to get to that level that you're talking about?
What I'll say is that if you ask that question, that if a person was to ask that question, that I don't have that DNA, but I really want to get, the very fact of asking that question implies that he has some semblance of that DNA. Because the people who truly don't have that DNA are too oblivious to even know that they don't have it.
Because, I don't even know what this DNA that you're talking about is.
Well, DNA is to be a legend. I want to be the greatest ever, right? I want to be in the history books. I want to, wherever everyone is in my craft, I don't want anyone near me, right? I don't want to, I want to walk my own path. I don't follow any rules. I don't listen to stupid coaches, right? I don't need all this instruction. They do everything against the grain. They're heretics, right? They're revolutionaries. They're that type of DNA.
Do they not have goals? I mean, don't you
they
consider?
So
isn't that I want to be the best in my craft, or I want to be, the greatest who does, or have more gold medals than anybody? I mean, do you consider that a goal? Because I know you're not fond of goals.
Yeah, I mean, you could retrofit something and then say, well, can you consider that a goal? I mean, by goals, I mean, I don't, by this time I want to accomplish this, and by this time I want to accomplish that. That's sort of what I mean. I mean, but when someone wants to be a legend, I don't think it's less of a goal. That's just who the person believes himself to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he feels like he was put on this earth to be. Like it's almost his birthright. So I mean, so I don't. Like I said, you can turn any English word into anything. Okay, but I'm talking about it from the most colloquial use of the word goal. That's what I was talking about.
So when one of those people comes to you to be their coach, advisor, whatever you want to call it, and you agree to work with them, what's the first question you're going to ask them?
I have no idea what the first question is. I never know what I'm going to ask anybody. I have no idea because it's not a script. I don't know anything. I mean, just whatever comes out comes out.
But what do you want to know about them?
You know, I will know who they are by the questions they ask. I will know who they are by if it's a face-to-face meeting,
mm-hmm.
how still and how and with what sort of look they look at me when I speak. You will pick up on all these cues.
Sure, absolutely.
That's when you know that if someone is truly serious or this is not for them.
Were there some interesting questions that you got asked recently that distinguished some people who were serious from others?
I never remember it. I don't remember anything. I don't know. I don't know. I think it's far more beneficial if you listen to sort of the flavor of what I'm saying as opposed to looking to the detail of the example.
So what do you mean when you say
you'll find your own example?
So talk to me a little bit about what you mean when you say performance is never a goal. It's always a byproduct or a side effect.
Yeah, I mean, if your goal is I want to play better or I want to perform better, that's an ulterior motive.
But that's a natural goal that most of us pursue.
Well, but that implies that very tenet implies that I should be doing something, some form of a doing that'll improve my performance. And that never gets anyone to the top. Sure, it might improve your performance, and even then, but even if it improves you today, it'll probably, it'll be less improvement tomorrow because the mind will figure out an antidote to whatever your new trick is. So that's why every trick has a shelf life. And that's why every red pill is followed by a blue pill.
True, absolutely.
Okay, so it isn't about how can I perform better. It is about what are the problems and what are the things that I have not realized that have hampered my performance. That's a fundamentally different question.
Mm-hmm.
Because one is, tell me what to do, or give me some 5-step plan or some stupid hack that I could, utilize to get, 5% better. And the other one has the potential of blowing the doors open by way of understanding.
So are you always competing against yourself then? Is this always a commitment
I
with
don't
yourself?
compete. No, I don't compete. I'm just constantly looking for the truth. I'm constantly looking that, is the thing that I've already found, is that truly rock bottom? Or is there another level more fundamental than that?
So what do you say then what do you mean when you say competition is for those who've not mastered and they're left with nothing but to compete? What is that?
Well, the person who masters, I mean, if you master darts and you can hit the bullseye every time, why would you compete? You would have no competition.
So you show up to a tournament, you show up to the Olympics and you're not competing, you're just going to go do your thing?
Well, why would you? I mean, from the outside, someone could say, oh, look, there's one person and there's 10 others, they are competing. Mm-hmm. I guess you could say that. But if you hit the bullseye every single time, you don't have any competition.
So
Right?
internally,
Competition is for the people who have not learned how to hit the bullseye every time, and they're getting together to compete to see who can get closer. So competition is like fighting over a half-eaten sandwich. Competition is fundamentally for non-masters.
so what do masters do?
Masters master. They don't look to beat anybody. They don't look to better anybody. And it isn't because that's not nice. Never go down that road, right? I don't know about nice and good and improper and everyone gets a trophy for playing and all that silliness. It's in my view, anything can be mastered. There is a way to own it. And because that's my view, that will naturally be my pursuit. If my view was that competition is the way, then naturally my pursuit would be to go and practice and out-practice the other in hopes that I could get 2% better than him.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever your view is, that's what your pursuit will be. And that's why your view and the lens through which you see things has real consequences.
So do you see the whole pursuit of chasing success in whatever shape or form a real problem for people who are chasing it?
Yeah.
Do we get just handcuffed by that?
Yeah, because what they're chasing is really the fringe benefits of success. They're chasing how to better another. And ironically, bettering another means that you are limited by the other person because you will only do just enough to inch past him. And once you have inched past him, you'll stop. So you'll never know how good you could have been.
Mm-hmm.
So competition breeds mediocrity.
Yeah, I live in that space. I believe I really, and over the last year or so, you have convinced me of that. So I'm there with you. At the same time, I also realize that as human beings, to get to that state that you're describing, that the five people really, really want to get a glimpse at, there has to be an element of fear, of letting go of everything that I've done in the past that at least gave me a taste of what success is like in order for me to try to pursue, maybe a more appropriate or permanent way to live in this state that you're talking about. Fear is real.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to get rid of for a lot of people, right? And I assume that the people who are at the level that you're describing maybe are not immune to it, but deal with it differently.
No, I don't think fear is a problem. I think what matters is what you're afraid of. That's the problem. See, if you're afraid of not becoming a success, that's a problem. If you're afraid of not learning the truth, that's not a problem. That's a very good problem to have. Because whatever you're afraid of, that's what you're going to make sure doesn't happen. So if you're afraid of losing, and if you're afraid of not becoming a success, then you'll go down the path of hard work and struggle. If you're afraid of not learning the absolute truth, and that's what you're truly afraid of, that how good you could have been, then you'll go down the path of mastery. So the nature of your fear has consequences.
So do you measure progress? How do you measure progress? Or do you?
No, I don't measure progress. I just measure did you get to where you want to go or not.
Well, in business, if we've got these super ambitious goals, we may not ever get there, but we get closer. Is that thumbs up or
I don't
thumbs
think it's
down?
about the goal. I don't think it's about the goal. I think it's who you believe yourself to be and what you believe your destiny is. what you believe to be your birthright, who you feel that you were put on this earth to be. I don't think it's about goals. So you have talk of goals when you have all these committees, because committees are drivel. Whenever you have more than one person in any situation, it's going to be drivel. That's why last time when you were asking me about boards and stuff, they don't know anything. They don't know anything. They don't. They may know what they want, but there isn't a single group in the world that has wisdom. Even if you go to a Buddhist monastery, that group doesn't have wisdom. There might be one guy, and it probably isn't even the head guy, who has wisdom. Groups are a dumbing down phenomenon. Groups are a regression to the mean phenomenon. There's no effectiveness. Well, I mean, the only effectiveness coming out of a group is, if you want to lift a big heavy log or a tree or something, there's power in numbers in that sense of muscle power. That's fine. Whereas one person couldn't do it alone. That I understand. That's fine. But anything that's on any sort of intellectual level or anything that's non-mechanical, groups will always be filled with mediocre people.
But you can't,
because if there's one brilliant person in that group, he will be eaten alive by the mediocre.
Yeah, you're dead on that. But how the hell do you build a great business, an impactful business, or build a great sports team without having a group that's working together in some way, shape, or form?
Well, yeah, I think the team is really a false construct. There's no team. From the outside, it looks like a team. But each person within that team is a perfect individual who is the best at his particular thing. So the group and the team, that's only an added societal label. The guitar player isn't helping the piano player play the piano while he's doing guitar with his left hand. Right? And it's only when one is purely individualistic and sticks to the perfection of his own craft that a symphony is created. If everyone's meddling in everyone else's business, then it would be a disaster.
So
yes, it's parallel play. It isn't really a team.
So does that then the first thing that comes to mind is Bill Belichick and his approach to say, just do your job. If you just do your job, the cumulative effect of everybody doing their job, we're going to win.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And here's the real consequence of this team myth is that, in youth sports, you'll have someone who's really good at a particular position, but he'll be told that he needs to play the different positions as well. That's stupid. This is, you're just being coached by people who fundamentally don't understand. Why? If your talent is in this position, for whatever reason it happens to be, right? That's the talent that you've been given. Then that person should be taught to maximize that 500%. But see, that's not fair. That's not considered fair. Everyone should get a chance to play in that, and everyone should get a participation trophy, right? And it's a stupidity, right? If you are great at center, why would you play defense? You shouldn't.
Sure.
At all, ever. You shouldn't. Now, if you're no good at center, then it makes sense to switch around to find out maybe you're an amazing defenseman. That makes sense. But see, ignorance has consequences. If you believe in this team myth, then naturally you will do silly, stupid things like take people away from their natural talents so that they get worse at what they're really good at in order to make them a little bit more mediocre at what they shouldn't be doing. Those are the natural results of believing in things that fundamentally are not true. Ignorance has consequences, real world consequences. This ruins people's lives.
And do you feel leaders building and growing companies can follow the same approach of, hey, do your job and that mentality and build a great business?
Yeah, but I would think that the leader would have to first ingrain that within himself, because in general, leaders tend to be too interested in what others think of him.
Yeah, true.
And that's a big hole that leader needs to fill before he speaks a single word to anybody else. Because as long as he is influenced by what others say, as long as he has insecurity about how he may be viewed, then he will not be anywhere near his ultimate with regard to the performance that he can put forth.
But do you feel that we could be totally immune as in leadership positions to what others think of us?
Of course.
Yeah, there are not a whole lot
but
of people.
not if you live in but not if you live in this world of prescriptions and you think if you have to follow 18,000 rules, no. The answer to your question is no. Then it's impossible. Okay? If you're worried about what the Wall Street Journal is going to write about you, and you're worried about what this social group is going to say about you, and you're worried about being nice and kind over here and not step on anybody's toes over here, and if you're going to follow all those rules, then I tell you, you might as well just quit your job and go sit home, because you'll be more respectable doing that. Because you're a little man in a big chair who is just sitting in some stupid post, and who is not anywhere near exercising his full capabilities and his full talents. And so, what's the use?
Well, sometimes if the right Wall Street Journal writes something that's detrimental or negative about me or my company, or about me in particular, I mean, that could have some negative consequences. So at some point, that's got to be in the back of my mind.
Well, if you sell out on your talent and doing what you believe that your instincts tell you is the pure and appropriate way to go, and you don't do that because you're afraid of what the Wall Street Journal might say, then you're an insult to your talent. And I can guarantee you one thing, that by making that concession, you will have sold out on something that might have led to something really big. At the end of the day, you got to be able to face yourself in the mirror. How many journals are you going to run from? How many reporters are you going to hide from?
Or we could just say it's fake news, right? Whatever the hell they write, we could just say it's fake news.
The greatest source of fake news is what's going on in the leader's head.
Of course, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean that's probably the subject of everything else that we're talking about here. But let me just ask you a couple more things, and we'll kind of pause this one. When you're talking about, I want to just stick with this leaders in a moment. I was fascinated by the depth of discussion that you had about purity and the importance of coming from a place that's pure. Do you just, when you're around others or with yourself, is that a feeling that you get of your level of purity about whatever it is that you're thinking or contemplating, and do you see it in others?
I mean, if another person is pure about what they're doing, yes, you can see that.
And do you feel it in yourself when you're asking yourself the type of reflective questions that you're asking yourself, and really deep questions? Do you just know that, hey, that this is really the essence of who I am?
Yeah, I never do a solo podcast. until I'm ready to speak just purely, regardless of who may like it or who may not. The arbitrator, the thing that I must be true to, are my deepest instincts of purity. Without a single drop of an attempt to put on a show or to be an entertainment or to play to any crowd, that is simply unacceptable to me.
One of the things that also resonates with me, and certainly the four other people and the people who at least listen to these conversations, they know that you are an independent thinker and you are definitely contrarian. But do you ever run ideas by other people? Like if you feel like you need to get someone else's perspective on something, anything, how do you pick the people in your inner circle to have discussions like that with?
Yeah, that's a good question. Absolutely. If there's a topic or if there's something that I don't know, then I will I will research an individual and find out what sort of things he's written, and then give him a call or write him something or whatever it is. And but that's just the first stage. I will know whether he's real or not by how he responds. I just because I'm asking him doesn't mean that my filter isn't on full blast. Mm-hmm. Because the truth is that the chances that I've stumbled upon someone who is truly speaking the truth is 1 in a million. Right. So I already know going in. I really am looking forward to the possibility that this might be the guy, but I kind of already know that the chances are fairly remote that it is going to be him. But if he speaks truth, I'll know it immediately, even though I may know nothing about the topic. It isn't topic specific.
What is
it then? You just know when someone's. You just know when someone's speaking the truth. You just know it. You can, you can sense fear. You can sense someone holding back, not wanting to go against the status quo. You can sense someone intentionally going against the status quo for purposes just to show off. You can sense where someone has really looked into the matter outside of just having read the material that's published about the matter, but looked into it himself and found. So there's 1,000 little things that you can that we as human beings can sense that someone's speaking the truth.
And do you find that real experts, really don't flaunt themselves, right? They're not out there talking about or profiling themselves as experts. I mean, that seems to be a red flag. Everybody's an expert nowadays.
Right. That's true. Yeah. Most experts aren't really experts. People are experts based upon what they've read, and the more that they have read about something, they brand themselves as an expert because they have read. But all the thing is that they've read, first of all, a lot of times weren't written by them, and even the people who were written by, they've derived it from other sources themselves. Mm-hmm. So everything's nepotism, right? Like true originality is extraordinarily rare. And I think part of the reason is, and it isn't necessarily even that there aren't truly original humans, because there definitely are. But what happens is that the truly original humans also have to have the DNA to not be afraid of what the world thinks of them. And so that's sort of a two-pronged attack that's required, because if a person doesn't have the DNA to say what they want to say and without being afraid of what the world might shoot them down, then they will regress to the mean, or they'll just stay quiet.
I mean, that's obviously what happens to most of the world, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
freedom
right.
looks very different to somebody has real expertise in something than somebody who just claims to be an expert, right? The former never talks
Mm-hmm.
about it.
I don't know. I don't think there's. I don't think it's a
You
matter of
never
humility.
talk
I really
about
don't.
you never talk about, the depth of knowledge or the depth of expertise or, you never talk about that.
Yeah, I don't because I don't know. There really isn't that strong desire in me to really impress anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's why. But whatever I want to say, I say it.
And do you consider that for others who feel that way? Is that, have they gone away from that insecurity of gaining others' approval and the opinion of others and so forth? Have they gone away from that and are really more focused on, the direction that somebody like you's heading? Is that total freedom of the mind that you had described a couple of times?
I think there's definitely freedom in genuinely not being interested in what others think of you. I think that's a massive milestone to reach in any human being's life, because that sort of imprisonment is
Toxic.
really, absolutely. That really ruins your life, because you do everything in order to get. But even no one really does that for other people. So the people who are afraid of what others think, they're not doing it for the other people. It's that they are afraid of imbibing what the others may think of them.
Mm-hmm. And that's
So
a real feeling.
Think,
That's real.
Yeah, it's not real. It's fabricated, but it's believed to be real.
But we feel it, at least the not
Yeah, sure.
with the exclusion
Absolutely.
of the 5 people, we feel it.
Yes. No. Yes. No question.
Now the big question is, or maybe we leave everybody with, how do we, once we have that feeling, what the hell do we do to try to gain that sense of freedom that that you describe?
That only becomes possible when the toxicity that one feels in being in that position is greater than the toxicity one feels of leaving it. Because when you're in that position, the desire for acceptance and validation is greater than the aversion of the toxicity that situation creates.
It's euphoria for a lot of people, the great majority of people.
So the greatest desire always wins. So when the desire for validation is greater than the feeling of toxicity for being dependent upon others' approval, then it's impossible to leave that space, because water doesn't flow uphill.
That's a good place to leave it.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.